Hello, my name is Brant Hunt, that is. My channel is simply called Discerning What is True. Today is the 31st day of August 2024. We're going to be reading chapter 9 of a book written by author Firstenberg as he's put together the pieces in this particular brilliant work he wrote a few years back, The Invisible Rainbow. So thank you for being here. I'm going through like a rainstorm right now, having some precious rainfall here. So if you hear rain in the background, there's nothing wrong. It's just simply is I'm going to continue to broadcast here. So the chapter 9, it is Earth's Electric Envelope. It's the name of the chapter. Here's a quote from Francis Thompson in the Mistress of Vision. All things by immortal power, near or far, hiddenly to each other linked are, that thou canst not stir a flower without troubling of a star. When I look at a flower, what I see is not the same as what a honeybee sees, who comes to drink its nectar. She sees beautiful patterns of ultraviolet that are invisible to me, and she is blind to the color red. A red poppy is ultraviolet to her. A centerfold flower, which looks a pure yellow to me, is to her purple, with a yellow center luring her to its nectar. Most white flowers are blue-green to her eyes. When I look upon the night sky, the stars appear as points of color twinkling through Earth's atmosphere. Everywhere else, except for the moon and a few planets, is blackness. But it is blackness of illusion. If you could see all the colors in the world, including the ultraviolets that honeybees can see, the infrareds that snakes can see, the low electric frequencies that catfish and salamanders can see, the radio waves, the X-rays, the gamma rays, the slow galactic pulsations, if you could see everything that is really there is a myriad shapes and hues in all of its blinding glory. Instead of blackness, you'll see form and motion everywhere, day and night. Sorry about that. Almost all of the matter in the universe is electrically charged. An endless sea of ionic particles called plasma, named after the contents of living cells because of the unpredictable lifelike behavior of electrified matter. The stars we see are made of electrons, protons, bare atomic nuclei, and other charged particles in constant motion. The space between the stars and galaxies, far from being empty, teems with electrical charge, subatomic particles swimming in vast swirling electromagnetic fields, accelerated by those fields to near light speeds. Plasma is such a good conductor of electricity, far better than any metals, that filaments of plasma, invisible wire billions of light years long, transport electromagnetically energy in gigantic circuits from one part of the universe to another, shaping the heavens. Under the influence of electromagnetic forces over a billion of years, cosmic whirlpools of matter collected along these filaments, light beads on a string, evolving to the galaxy that decorate our night sky. Hold on just a second here, folks. Yeah, sorry about that. The cloud came up. I didn't think it was going to rain a whole lot. It actually very small clouds, and suddenly it's become a pretty large storm. Let's see where we at here. I think we're at okay. In addition, thin sheets of electric current called double layers, like the membranes of a biological cells, divide galactical space into immense compartments, such as we would say, can have different physical, chemical, and electrical and magnetic properties. There may even, some speculate, be matter on one side of a double layer and antimatter on the other. Enormous electrical fields prevent the different regions of space from mixing, just as the integrity of our own cells is preserved by the electric fields of the membranes surrounding them. Our own Milky Way, in which we live, a medium-sized spiral galaxy 100,000 light years across, rotates around its center once every 250 million Earth years, generating around itself a galactic-sized magnetic field. Filaments of plasma 500 light years long, generating additional magnetic fields, have been photographed looping out of our galactic center. Our sun, also made of plasma, sends out an ocean of electrons. So here's the key. Yeah, it's interesting what you taught in school biology. They never said that our sun was actually made of plasma, as far as I recollect. That was in high school. Sends out an ocean of electrons, protons, and helium ions in a steady current called the solar wind, blowing at 300 miles per second. It bathes the Earth and all the planets before diffusing out into the plasma between the stars. The Earth, with its core of iron, rotates on its axis in the electric fields of the solar system and the galaxy. And as it rotates, it generates its own magnetic field that traps and deflates the charged particles of these solar winds. They wrap the Earth in an envelope of plasma called the magnetic sphere, which stretches out on the night sky of the planet into a comet-like tail hundreds of millions of miles long. Some of the particles from the solar winds collect in layers we call the Van Allen belts, where they circulate 600 to 35,000 miles above our heads. Driven along magnetic lines of force towards the poles, the electrons collide with oxygen and nitrogen atoms in the upper atmosphere. These fluoresce to produce the northern and southern lights, the aurora borealis and australis, that dance in the long winter nights of the high latitudes. The sun is also bombards our planet with ultraviolet light and X-rays. These strike the air 50 to 250 miles above us, ionizing it, freeing the electrons that carry electrical currents in the upper atmosphere. This, the Earth's own layer of plasma, is called the ionosphere. The Earth is also showered, with charged particles from all directions called cosmic rays. These are atomic nuclei and subatomic particles that travel at the velocities approaching the speed of light. From within the Earth comes radiation emitted by uranium and other radioactive elements. Cosmic rays from space and radiation from the rocks and soils provide the small ions that carry the electric currents that surround us in the lower atmosphere. In this electromagnetic environment, we evolve. We all live in a fairly constant vertical electric field averaging 130 volts per meter. In fair weather, the ground beneath us has a negative charge. The ionosphere above us has a positive charge. And the potential differences between ground and sky is about 300,000 volts. The most spectacular reminder that electricity is always playing around through us bringing messages from the sun and stars, of course, is lightning. Electricity courses through the sky from far above us, explodes downward in thunderstorms, rushes through the ground beneath us, and flows gently back up through the air in fair weather, carried by small ions. All of this happens continuously as electricity animates the entire Earth. About 100 bolts of lightning, such delivering a trillion watts of energy, strike the Earth every second. During the thunderstorms, the electric tensions in the air around us can reach 4,000 volts per meter and more. When I first learned about the global electrical current, or I should say circuit, 25 years ago, I drew the following sketch to help me think about it. So he shows like a window type of deal with the plants, and it envelopes the whole area here like an envelope, so to speak, with the sun and the thunderstorms. Living organisms, as the drawing indicates, are part of the global circuit. Each of this generates our own electric fields, which keeps us vertically polarized like the atmosphere, with our feet and hands negative with respect to our spine and head. Our negative feet walk on the negative ground as our positive heads points to the positive sky. The complex electrical circuits that courses gently through our bodies are completely by ground and sky, and in the very real way, the earth and the sun. Again, the great yin and the great yang of the Yellow Emperor's classic are energy sources for life. It is not widely appreciated that the reverse is also true. Not only does life need the earth, but the earth needs life. The atmosphere, for example, exists only because of green things having been growing for billions of years. Plants create the oxygen, all of it. Hear me. Plants create the oxygen, all of it, and very likely the nitrogen too. Yet we fail to treat our fragile cushion of air as the irreplaceable treasure that it is, more precious than the rarest diamond. Because for every atom of coal or oil that we burn, for every molecule or carbon dioxide that we produce from them, we destroy forever one molecule of oxygen. The burning of fossil fuels or ancient plants that once breathed life into the future is really the undoing of creation. I don't know if I agree with that. You need both. I don't see how it can work that way, but I might be wrong about that. Electrically, too, life is essential. Living trees rise hundreds of feet into the air from the negatively charged ground, and because more raindrops, except in thunderstorms, carry positive charge down to earth. Trees attract rain out of the clouds, and the falling of trees contribute electrically towards a loss of rainfall where forests used to stand. Quote, as for men, end quote, says Lauren Elsley, quote, those mythical little detached ponds with their own swarming corpuscular life, what were they but a way that water has of going about beyond the reach of rivers? Not only we, but especially trees, are the earth's way of watering the desert. Trees increase, this is positive truth, folks. Trees increase evaporation and lower temperatures by far. By far. No doubt about that. And the currents of life speeding through their sap are continuously with the sky and the rain. We are all part of a living earth, as the earth is a member of a living solar system and a living universe. The play of electricity across the galaxy, the magnetic rhymes of the planets, the 11-year cycles of sunspots, the fluctuations in the solar wind, thunder, and lightning upon the earth, biological currents within our bodies, as to say, the one dependent upon all the other. We are like tiny cells in the body of the universe. Events on the other side of the galaxy affect all life here on Earth. And it is perhaps not too far-fetched to say that any dramatic change in life on Earth will have a small but noticeable effect on the sun and stars. Section B. When the city and South London Electric Railway began operating in 1890, it interfered with delicate instruments at the Royal Observatory at Greenwich, 4.5 miles away. Little did the physicists, that is, there know that electromagnetic waves from that and every other electric wave were also radiating into space and altering the electric magnetic sphere, a fact that would not be discovered until decades later. To understand the significance for life, let us return first to the story of lightning. The house we live in, which is the biosphere, the roughly 55-mile high space filled with air that wraps around the Earth, is a resonant cavity that rings like a gong every time a lightning bolt strikes. In addition to maintaining the static electric field of 130 volts per meter, in which we all stand and walk, and in which birds fly, lightning sets the biosphere ringing at particular low frequency tones, sometimes 8 beats per second, or hertz, or 14, or 20, or 26, or 32, and so forth. These tones are named for the wind with tones for Winfried Schulman, the German physicist who predicted their existence and who, with his students Herbert Koenig, proved their constant presence in the atmosphere in 1953. It so happens that in the state of awake relaxation, our brain tunes into these precise frequencies. The dominant pattern of a human electroencephalogram from before birth through adulthood, the well-known alpha rhythm ranging from 8 to 13 hertz, or 7 to 13 hertz in a newborn, is bound by the first two Schulman resonances. A old part of the brain called the limbic system, which is involved in emotions and in long-term memory, produces theta waves of 4 to 7 hertz, which are bounded above by the first Schumann resonances. The theta rhythm is more prominent in young children and in adults in meditation. These same frequencies, alpha and theta, which surprisingly little variation, pulsate so far as it is known in all animals in a state of relaxation. Dogs show a alpha rhythm identical to ours of 8 to 12 hertz. In cats, the range is slightly wider from 8 to 15 hertz. Rabbits, guinea pigs, goats, and cows, frogs, birds, and reptiles all show nearly the same frequency. Schulman's student, Conan, was so impressed by the resemblance these atmospheric waves bear to the electrical oscillation of the brain that he conducted a series of experiments with far-reaching implications. The first Schumann resonance, he wrote, is so completely identical to the alpha rhythm that even expert is hard-pressed to tell the difference between the tracing from the brain and the atmosphere. Conan did not think this was a coincidence. The first Schumann resonance appears during fair weather. He noted in calm, balanced conditions, just as the alpha rhythm appears in the brain in a calm and relaxed state. The delta rhythm, on the other hand, which consists of irregular, highly amplitude waves around 3 hertz, appears in the atmosphere under disturbed, unbalanced weather conditions, and in the brain in disturbed or diseased states as headaches, spastic conditions, tumors, and so forth. So what he's saying here is, I'm gathering simply, is that one is a harmonic wave that actually allows you to be in a calm, relaxed state, and then there's another amplitude wave around 3 hertz that causes what we call being unbalanced, and your brain becomes disturbed, and diseases start, either from headaches, spastic conditions, or even further on to tumors. An experiment involved nearly 50,000 people attending a traffic exhibition in Munich in 1953. Conan was able to prove that these layer types of disturbed waves, when present in the atmosphere, significantly slowed human reaction times, while the 8 hertz Schumann waves do just the opposite. The larger the Schumann signal in the atmosphere, the quicker people's reactions were on that day. Conan then did these effects in the laboratory. An artificial field of 3 hertz, that is a delta range, slowed human reactions, while an artificial field of 10 hertz, which is called the alpha range, accelerated them. Conan also noted that during the 3 hertz exposure, some of the subjects complained of headaches, fatigue, tightness in the chest, or sweating from their palms. In 1965, James R. Hamer, Hamer, published the results of the experiments along these same lines that he had conducted for Northrop Space Laboratories in an article which he entitled called, quote, Biological Entrainment of the Human Brain by Low-Frequency Radiation, end quote. Like Honan, he showed that frequencies above 8 hertz quickened reaction time, while lower frequencies had the opposite effect. But he went further. He proved that the human brain could distinguish between frequencies that differed only slightly from each other, but only if the signal was weak enough. When he reduced the signal strength to 0.0038 volts per meter, which is close to the value of the Earth's own field of 7.5 hertz, had a significant different effect than 8.5 hertz and 9.5 hertz, and then even 10.5 hertz. Lightning is not yet done with its repertory. In addition to the static fields that we walk in and the low frequencies that speak to our brains, lightning also provides us with a steady symphony of higher frequencies called atmospherics, or just cepherics, which reach thousands of cycles per second. They sound like twigs snapping if you listen to them on a very low frequency, a VLF radio, a very long or very low frequency, I should say, radio, and usually originates in thunderstorms that way. However, thousands of miles away, other sounds called whistlers resemble the descending tones of a slide whistle, often originates in the thunderstorms on the opposite end of the earth. Their falling tones are produced during the long journey these waves have taken as they are guided along magnetic field lines into outer space and back to Earth in the opposite hemisphere. These waves may even bounce back and forth many times from one end of the Earth to another, resulting in trains of whistles that seemed so unworldly when they were first discovered in the 1920s that they generate newspaper articles that not so inappropriate titles like, quote, Voices from Outer Space, end quote. Among the other sounds one may hear, especially at higher latitudes, originally somewhere in the electrical environment of our planet, are a steady hiss and a dawn chorus, so named because of its resemblance to chirping birds. Both of these sounds rise and fall gently every 10 seconds or so with the slow pulsation of the Earth's magnetic field. This very low frequency symphony bathes our nervous system. Its frequency range roughly from 200 to 30,000 hertz. Span the range of our auditorial system and also, as Conan observed, including the frequencies of the impulses that our brain sends to our muscles, that is. The effect our very low or frequency environment has on us, the VLF, has on our well-being was resoundingly demonstrated by Reinhard Reiter, R-E-I-T-E-R, in 1954 when he tabulated the results of a number of population studies that he and his colleagues had conducted in Germany involving about 1 million people. Births, deaths, suicides, rapes, work injuries, traffic accidents, human reaction times, amputees, pains, and complaints of people with brain injuries all rose significant on days with strong VLF stereos. End quote. Our VFL environment regulates biological rhythms in both humans and animals. Golden hamsters, which have been popular pets since the 1930s, live in the wild near Aleppo, that is Syria, where every winter for about 3 months they go in and out of hibernation. But scientists who have tried to use hamsters as a subject for hibernation studies in the laboratory have been puzzled by their inability to trigger hibernation in these animals by exposing them to the prolonged cold, reducing hours of daylight, or controlling any other known environmental factor. In mid-1960, climatologists Wolfgang Ludwig and Langvar Meck took a different approach. They kept the hamster during the winter in a Faraday cage. So if you've got a Faraday cage, folks, it's important. I've talked about that doing with radio. Shielded from all natural electromagnetic waves and without any alterations of temperature or hours of daylight, at the beginning of the 4th week, they introduced the natural outdoor atmospheric frequencies by means of an antenna, whereupon the hamsters promptly fell asleep. During the following 2 months, the researchers were able to put the animals into in and out of hibernation by introduction or removing either the natural outdoor frequency or artificial BLF fields that imitated the natural winter pattern. Then, as the beginning of the 13th week of the experiment, the frequency in the enclosure were changed so as to initiate the natural summer pattern, and within a half an hour, as if panicked by the sudden change in season, the animal woke up and began a, quote, movement storm, end quote, running day and night for an entire week until the experiment was terminated. In other words, good grief. Wow. In repetitions of this experiment on other hamsters, the researchers found that this high level of activity could not be induced unless the state of hibernation had been triggered first. The artificial fields they used were extremely weak, so small as 10 millivolts per meter for the electric field and 26.5 microamperes per meter for the magnetic field. One way to find out if the Earth's natural fields are as important to people as to hamsters would be to place human subjects in a completely shielded room for a few weeks and see what happens, which is exactly what behavior physiologist Ruger Weber did at the Max Planck Institute in Germany. In 1967, he had an underground building constructed containing 2 isolated chambers. Both were carefully shielded against outside light and sound, and one was shielded also against electromagnetic fields. During the next 2 decades, hundreds of people had their sleep cycles, body temperature, and other internal rhythms monitored while they lived in one or the other of these rooms, usually for a month at a time. Viva found that even without any variation in light and darkness and without any clocks and time cues, the body's sleep cycle and internal rhythms remained close to 24 hours, so long as the Earth's natural electromagnetic fields were present. However, when these fields were excluded, the body rhythms usually became longer, erratic, and desynchronized with each other. The average, quote, free-running, quote, sleep cycle was 25 hours, but in individual cases was as short as 12 hours, as long as 65 hours. Variation in body temperature, potassium aggregation, speed of mental processes, and other rhythms drifted at their own separate rate, completely different from one another, and no longer coinciding, that is, with the sleep-wake cycle at all. But as soon as the artificial 10 Hertz signal close to the first Schumann resonance was introduced into the shielded room, the body rhythms all immediately resynchronized to a 24-hour period. Section C. Life residing between heaven and earth partakes of both polarities, as we will see in the next chapter. The distribution of electric changes in living beings has been measured and mapped externally. In plants, this was done by Professor of Anatomy Harold Saxton Burr, B-U-R-R, at Yale University, and animals by orthopedic surgeon Robert O. Becker at the State University of New York, Upstate Medical Center in Syracuse. The areas of greatest positive voltage in animals are the center of the head, the heart, and the lower abdomen, and in trees, the crown. The places of general negative voltage in trees are the roots, and in animals, the 4 feet and the end of the tail. These are the places where the global electrical circuit enters and leaves the body on its way between heaven and earth, and the channels through which the electricity travels inside living beings. Distributing the electricity of heaven and earth to every organ were precisely mapped several thousand years ago, and are part of a body of knowledge that we know today as Chinese acupuncture. It was written down in the, I can't pronounce, so I'll just spell this guy, Huangdinijing, the Yellow Emperor's classic of internal medicine between 500 and 300 BC. The very names of key acupunctural points reveal an understanding that the circuitry of the body is continuously with that of earth and sky. For example, kidney 1, for example, the point underneath the foot in the center of the soul, is known in Chinese as the Yang Huang, meaning, quote, bubbling spring, end quote, because earth energy bubbles up into the feet through these points and climbs up the legs and the rest of the body towards the heavens. Governing vessel 20, the point on top of the head in the center, is called Bahu, B-A-I-H-U-I, Bahu. The, quote, hundred convergence, end quote. This is also the thousand-petal locus of Indian tradition, the place where the energy of heaven descends into our body towards the earth, and the flows of our body converge and reach towards the sky. But not until the 1950s did scientists beginning with Yoshiko Nakatania in Japan and Reinhold Volt in Germany begin to actually measure the electrical conductivity of acupuncture points and meridians, and to finally translate the word QI, or formally spelled Chi, CHI, into modern language that means simply electricity. Professor Lin, L-I-N, is a professor of chemical and material science at National Center University in Taiwan. The QI that flows through our meridians, he tells us, is the electrical current that brings both power and information to our cells. Current whose source is both internal and external. Every acupuncture point has a double function as an amplifier for the internal electrical signals, boosting their strength as they travel along the meridians, and as an antenna that receives electromagnetic signals from the environment. The Dantians, D-A-N-T-I-A-N-S, or energy centers of Chinese medicine, located in the head, heart, and abdomen, equivalent to the chakras of Indian tradition, are electromagnetic oscillators that resonate at particular frequencies and that communicate with the meridians and regulate their flow. They have capacitors and inductors, like oscillators, in an electrical circuitry. The body, says Lin, is a super complex electromagnetic oscillating network, enormously intricate and delicate. In 1975, Becker and his colleagues at Upstate Medical Center found that, in general, acupuncture points are not only places of low resistance, but of high potential, actually averaging 5 millivolts higher than the surrounding skin. They also found that the path of a meridian, at least on the surface of the body, has significant greater conductivity and lower electrical resistance than nearby skin. As a result of the work of Nakatania, Volt, and Becker and others, electroacupuncture using microamperture currents have taken its place alongside traditional acupuncture and commercial point locators, which find acupuncture points by measuring the electrical conductivity of the skin, have come into use among non-traditional practitioners here in the West. In China, electroacupuncture devices have been in use since 1934. They are a tacit acknowledgement that the body is an electrical instrument, and that its health or sickness depends on the proper distribution and balance of the electrical energies that constant flow around and through us. Both ironically, they also prevent the scientific knowledge from becoming true knowledge. For to substitute artificial electricity for atmospheric electricity and replenishing the body is to forget that the electricity of the air is there, nourishing us and giving us life. At the Shanghai University of Traditional Chinese Medicine, the Fujian Institute of Traditional Chinese Medicine, and elsewhere in China, scientists continue to confirm that the substance that flow in our meridians is electricity, and that electricity is not only a force that moves locomotives, but it is an incredible, complex, and delicate stuff of life. Typically, the electrical resistance of an acupuncture point is 2 to 6 times lower than the resistance of the surrounding skin, and its capacity, its ability to store electrical energy, is 5 times as great. Commercial point locators do not always work because sometimes, depending on the internal state of the individual, an acupuncture point can have a higher resistance than its surrounding. But the meridians always respond to an active and nonlinear way to electrical stimulation, and they react, says modern researchers, exactly like electrical circuit. The physical structure of the conductive points and meridians have been tentatively identified. In the 1960s, a North Korean physician, Bong Han Kim, published detailed photographs of an entire network of tiny corpuscles and thread-like structures that connect them, that exist throughout the body and our skin, in our internal organs and nervous system, and in and around our blood vessels. These ducts, he found, were electrically conductive, and the fluid within them surprisingly contained large amounts of DNA. Their electrical pulsation was considered slower than the heartbeat. In the skin of a rabbit, the pulsation rate was between 10 and 20 per minute. The pathways of the superficial ducts in the skin matched the classical pathways of the acupunctural meridians. The reason Kim succeeded in identifying this system is that he worked only on living animals because the ducts and corpuscles, almost transparent to begin with, disappear shortly after death. He stained the living tissue with an unspecified blue dye that was absorbed only by the network of ducts and corpuscles. Kim's book on the Chiropractic system was published in Pujan in 1963. The reason his work has been so completely ignored has partly to do with his relations with the North Korean government. Kim was expunged from official records in 1966, and rumors had it that he committed suicide, and partly with the fact that the outside world does not want to find physical proof of electrical nature. So sad, isn't it? But in the mid-1980s, Jean-Claude Darras, a French physician working in the nuclear medicine department at Necker Hospital in Paris, replicated some of Kim's experiments. He injected a radioactive dye containing technetium 99 into various acupuncture points of the feet of volunteers, and found that the dye migrated precisely along the meridian pathways of classical acupuncture, just as Kim had found. In 2002, Kwam Sul, who had already been investigating the electromagnetic properties of acupuncture meridians, headed up a team at Seoul National University in South Korea, which looked for and found most of the thread-like duct systems described by Kim. A breakthrough came in November 2008, the discovery that trypan blue, a dye that was previously known to stain only dead cells if injected into living tissue, will stain only the nearly invisible threads and corpuscles they have painstakingly begun to identify. The, quote, primal vascular system, end quote, as it was now called, suddenly became a subject of research in other centers in South and North Korea, as well as in China, Europe, Japan, and the United States. The ducts and corpuscles of the system were found, just as Kim had described, resting on the surface of and penetrating inside the internal organs, floating inside the large blood and lymphatic vessels, winding along the outside of the major blood vessels and nerves, traveling inside the brain and spinal cord, and following the paths of the known meridians within the deep layers of the skin. When the surface of the skin was stained with the dye, only points along the meridian absorbed it. In September 2010, at the first International Symposium of Primal Vascular System held in Jecheon, Korea, Sartorian Fujiwara, retired professor of anatomy at Osaka City University of Japan, reported tentative success at surgically identifying a superficial primal node, an acupuncture point, in the skin of a rabbit abdomen. And in 2015, researchers at Seoul National University used in a commercially available staining kit to reveal a thread-like vessel running just beneath the abdominal skin of anesthetically living rats. The vessel, colored dark blue from the stain, followed the pathway of the acupuncture meridian called the conceptual vessel and connected discrete corpuscles corresponding to the location or location of the known acupuncture points on the meridian. The fine structure of the system of nodes and ducts were revealed by electron microscopy. The staining process, they noted, takes less than 10 minutes. Section D. In early 1970, atmospheric physicists finally woke up to the fact that the Earth's magnetic field was highly disturbed. Not all of those whistlers or hiss and choruses, line roars, and other colorful sounds that have been listening to for half a century were caused by nature. This discovery came about as a result of efforts to deliberately alter the Earth's electromagnetic environment, efforts that have accumulated today in the operation of Project HARP, which I think most of us are well about this, located in Gakona, Gakona, Alaska. You can see chapter 16 of this. Under contract with the Office of Naval Research, scientists at Stanford University Radio Science Laboratory had built a 100 kilowatt VLF transmitter at SIPLE station in Antarctica, broadcasting in the 1.5 to 16 kilohertz range. So this is on the very low spectrum of the AM. This is very low frequency, very low. The purpose of the 13-mile-long antenna that stretched over the frozen ice, according to Robert Hillowell, one of the members of the Stanford team, included, quote, control of the ionosphere, control of the radiation belts, and new methods of VLF and ULF communications. So the VLF is very low frequency, and I assume that ULF is ultra low frequency communication, end quote. It had been discovered accidentally in 1958 that the VLF transmission originated on the Earth's interact with particles in the magnetic sphere, stimulating them to emit new VLF waves, which can then be received at opposite ends of the Earth. The purpose of the Stanford project was to do this deliberately, to inject sufficient quantities of very low frequency energy into the magnetic sphere so that it would not only trigger new waves, but that these trigger waves might in turn cause electrons to rain out of the Earth radiation belts into the atmosphere, altering the properties of the ionosphere for military purposes. A primary goal of the Department of Defense was to devise a method of stimulating the ionosphere to emit VLF, that is very low frequency, to ELF, which is called extra low frequency, or even, quote, ultra low frequencies waves in order to communicate with submarines submerged beneath the oceans. That's correct. That's verified. I've known about that for some time. That's how, in fact, that's how we communicate with our submarines, is with this very VLF and lower frequencies underneath the oceans. That's true. Because we've been playing with this for quite a while. The VLF transmitter at SIPL and a VLF receiver in northern Quebec at Roberval were part of this early experiment. The data they collected were surprising. First, the signal received in Quebec media transmission from Antarctica was larger than expected. The waves broadcast from Antarctica were not only triggering new emissions from particles in the magnetic sphere, but were being amplified more than 1,000-fold in the magnetic sphere before returning to Earth and being received in Quebec. Only a half a watt of broadcast file. Okay, so 1 watt. Now think about this. Now you got to think about it. So let's say you got I think you got a 25 watt light bulb in your refrigerator. Okay, this is a half a watt, but you have to understand they have an antenna running across. So I think I'm trying to remember how many miles it was earlier, and 13 miles long. What happened? Were required in order to be detected near the opposite pole of the Earth after being relayed from the magnetic sphere. The second surprise was that Roberval was receiving frequencies that were unrelated to the frequencies that originated at SIPL, but they were instead multiplies of 60 hertz. The SIPL signal had been altered on its journey through outer space to bear the imprint of the electric power grid. Since those first discoveries, scientists have learned a great deal about this form of pollution, now known as, quote, power line harmonic radiation, end quote. It appears that harmonics from all over the world's power grids leak continuously into the magnetic sphere, where they are greatly amplified as they bounce back and forth between the northern and southern hemisphere, generating their own rising and falling whistles, just like radiation from lightning. But there is a fundamental difference. Before 1889, whistlers and other lightning trigger sounds played continuously over the entire range of the terrestrial instrument. Today, the music is stilt, dull, and often confined to multiples of 50 or 60 hertz. Every component of the natural symphony has been radically altered. The, quote, dawn chorus, end quote, is quieter on Sundays than on the other days of the week. And the startling frequencies of most choruses emissions are power line harmonics. So I would think it's quieter on Sunday because basically people sleep later. There is usually no work going on Sundays than normal, as you think about the 40-hour week. So there's less people, there's less. It's less, you know. So it's starting. So it seems like that the entire Hiss band is caused by power line radiation, end quote, wrote Helliwell in 1975, and the natural slow pulsation of the Earth magnetic field below 1 hertz, which are also important to all life, are strongest on weekends, eventually because they are being suppressed by radiation from the power grid, and this radiation is stronger on weekdays. I'm just speculating what I just said earlier, so I don't know if this is true or not. So we'll continue on. Anthony Fraser Smith, also at Stanford, by analyzing geomagnetic activity data collected since 1868, showed that this is not a new phenomenon, but has been happening since the first use of an AC, alternating current, and has been increasing over time. Now remember, there were early 1900s, we had what's called AC and DC. DC was direct current, and that meant simply the current was shot. What I think is just simply my speculation here. It's a shot to a particular area, and it was shot to the next boosting station that would shoot it back up and shoot it back out again. It would go further away, and then it would have another station. This was the negative. This was the problem why direct current would not work. It was going to cost a lot of money to keep that direct current to stay at the let's just say it's saying creating 60 watts. Okay, would have to run 10 miles or whatever it is lengthwise. We're just speculating here. So another 10 miles would have to have another power grid thing set up to do the same thing. Alternating current, what I was saying is simply an up and down type effect. Is what I'm thinking. I don't know a lot about electricity. Okay, folks, so I'm just speculating. So it would continue on. It would not have to have so many stations, what I call boosting stations, so to speak. Data collected between 1958 and 1992 showed that the PC1 activity, I don't know what PC is, representing geomagnetic pulsations between 0.2 and 5 hertz, has been 15 to 20% greater on weekends than in the middle of the week. The structure of the Van Allen radiation belt seems also to have been altered. What the Department of Defense had wanted to do intentionally was apparently already being done massively by the world's electric power grids. Why? Physicists had long wondered, are there two electron-filled radiation belts around the Earth, an inner and outer, separated by a layer that is virtually empty of electrons. This electron slot, in quote, something, is continually drained of its electrons by their interaction with radiation from power lines. These electrons in turn rain down over the Earth, modifying the electrical properties of the atmosphere. Not only may this increase the frequency of thunderstorms, but it may shift the values of the Schulman resonances to which all living things are attuned. In short, the electromagnetic environment of the entire Earth is radically different today from what it was before 1889. Satellite observations show that radiation originating from power lines often overwhelms natural radiation from lightning. Power line radiation is so intense that atmospheric scientists lament their inability to do fundamentally research. There's almost nowhere left on Earth or even in space where a VLF receiver can be used to study natural phenomena. This might be the same reason why in certain areas in the northern western here in the United States, they're only called quiet cities, not quiet city, quiet community. There are only about 5 or 6 of them. Is where they're looking for a quiet place. There's no cell phones. There's nothing of that nature in those areas. And people go there as a refuge in order to try to heal themselves. Seriously, it's not a joke. Under natural conditions as they existed before 1889, intense VLF activity leading to electron rain, and the shifting of the Schulman resonances occurred only during geomagnetic storms. Today, magnetic storms never end. So he's saying the last statement says, today the magnetic storm never ends. In other words, it never stops. It continues, goes on and on. So there used to be a occurrence, simply there was a geomagnetic storm, and it would drop, and it would come back. What's happening, what he's saying, I'm speculating here, is that it never stops. Section E of Chapter 9. If the atmosphere is, at times, electrified beyond the degree which is usual and necessary to preserve the body in a due state of excitement, the nerves must be too highly excited and under a continual operation of undue stimulus, becoming extremely irritable and subject to debility. This is what I said to someone else here recently. I know something's wrong. Okay, I know something's wrong, folks. I know that now I'm more irritable than I was 5 years ago or 2 years ago. Now, I don't know if that occurs with other people, but I know that is what I know about my own personality. I think me being a Aries and a fire deal, which naturally I don't need any stimulus in the first place. If I see something wrong, I'm going to say, excuse me, that's wrong. You know, I don't like what I call liars. Okay, I don't. It upsets me extremely, especially politicians and preachers, a few others too. So I'm already noticing that, and I actually communicate with a friend that talks about this sometimes, and I noticed that about my own state. You see, this is why you're seeing people very irritable. Something sets them off, just like that. Noel Webster, A Brief History of Epidemic and Pestilence Diseases in 1799, page 38. A large, rapid, quantitative change in the Earth's electromagnetic environment has occurred 6 times in history. In 1889, power line harmonic radiation began. From that year forward, the Earth magnetic field bore the imprint of power line frequencies and their harmonics. In that year, exactly, the natural magnetic activity of the Earth began to be suppressed. This has affected all life on Earth. The power line age was ushered in by the 1889 pandemic of influenza. And I would suggest you listen to a gentleman. He talks about this, and this is kind of the important part on BitChute. A gentleman named Dr. Bill McGraw. He talks about this, how it affects our bodies and how we feel anymore. It's becoming harder and harder for us to feel better, folks. That's a fact. You know anybody that feels good these days? Seriously, do you know anybody that feels good? You know of anyone that doesn't have any disease? I don't think so. Maybe that would be in early childhood. In 1918, the radio era began. It began with the building of hundreds of powerful radio stations at LF and BLF frequencies. The frequencies guaranteed most altered the magnetic sphere. The radio era was ushered in by the Spanish influential pandemic of 1918. So he's connecting what we call the pandemics, real pandemics, from 1889, starting with the power line, and then later on, less than almost 20 years later, the radio era caused the Spanish influence. He's trying to connect the dots here. So in 1957, the radar era began. It began with the buildings of hundreds of powerful early warning radar stations that littered the high latitudes of the northern hemisphere, hurling millions of watts of microwave energy skyward. Low-frequency components of these waves rode on the magnetic field lines to the southern hemisphere, polluting it as well. Because there was nobody building this stuff in the southern hemisphere. When I'm talking about southern hemisphere, we're talking about countries like, we're talking about South America, we're talking about most of Africa, we're talking about Australia. In 1968, the satellite era began. So less than 10 years later, we've got something else out here. It began with the launch of dozens of satellites whose broadcast power was relatively weak, but since they were already in the magnetic sphere, they had as big an effect on it as a small amount of radiation that managed to enter it from sources on the ground. The satellite era was also ushered by the Hong Kong flu pandemic of 1968. What he's trying to point out is simply people are dying because we continue to mess with stuff that we really don't have no idea what we're doing. The other two mileposts of technology, the beginning of the wireless age era and the application of the high frequency active aurora research program, HART, belong to very recent times and will be discussed later in this book. So that's the end of chapter 9. I think this is critical for us to understand what's going on. Is this technology really beneficial for our well-being? That's this question. I don't have the answer right now. I'm just reading a book here, sharing my thoughts somewhat. But we can see certain things are happening due because man is electrifying everything. And he's talking about 4 major, what we call pandemics. The 1889 one, less than 20 years again. We had the radio era, which is the second one. Same thing happened. In 1957, there was also an issue of another flu pandemic, again, and it's all to do with electrical, folks. In 1968, another one, the satellite era. And I'm sure the high frequency thing is also in part deal with that HART. But anyway, we're going to stop here in chapter 9. Thank you for listening, and wish you a good day. And this in the program here. Let's see. So I've got a couple of quotes here. Somebody made. I didn't know if anybody was listening here. Sorry, Mike Melcher. Let's see. For the last lot of laughs, I guess is what it is. 2 weeks ago, I was saying how I thought this solar activity connected to the beginning of the book. Maybe so. I don't know about that. I'm very interested in what you would think of Roger Spur's research. I don't know anything about Roger Spur. Sorry, I don't know his YouTube channel, Mud Fossils University. I'm not into that. Sorry. He connects the light research with the non-Amati Codex. Yeah, I read some of the non-Amati scriptures, such and such, which I think are do what I call spiritual connections. I don't know if it has anything to do with the light research there. I don't really. That's not my realm here. Sorry, it's just. I take his light research and contact it to solar flares. I don't know, Mike. I think something's happened here, that the Earth has done things that's messing with something it has no idea what it's doing. And it's basically what this chapter I just read, he's pointing out simply is that okay, you mentioned before where you are reading this book from. Could you tell me again, please? I'm reading this book from a gentleman off of the internet here, author Firstenberg. I read it to myself last year. I had the book, Interlibrary Loan, and then I decided I wanted to read it again because I think it's pertinent. And I do believe it's pertinent. I do believe simply is that the cell phones, the what they're talking about, the 5G is affecting us. It's affecting people. There are people, and that's the ones that are worse off, Mike, are going to what I call very worse off and being told, hey, you need to go to a quiet area where there's no quote unquote cell phone pollution. That's what I gather. It's to me, we're just doing some things that basically we don't need to be doing. All for quote unquote, maybe to do with basically greed. Think about that. He's pointing out simply every time they've done this 4 times, 1889, the 1918 deal, and the 1958 deal, and the 1968, I think it was, the Hong Kong flu. Each have been what we call causing death on this planet in a major way, pandemic. So I've got another quote here. Someone had John Elijah, lecture is perfect timing for me. Been looking into free energy in the ether. Yes, it'd be nice to be, if you can afford that, free energy from the sun um, and the ether, yes. Yeah, so Mike mentions he's also an Aries. I noticed simply is that John's also saying he's Aries too. Okay, so Aries are very fiery type of people. In other words, I know that from my own personality type. Now, if you've been born in that, you have this dilemma in yourself, very strong right or not right or left, right or wrong perspectives. In other words, when you see something wrong, you have an alarm button goes on. If you're thinking of what I call moral viewpoints, you see, you're saying something's wrong here. Excuse me, hey, hello, I need to get on the podium here and say something. So I don't know, is there such a thing as coincidence or only divine guidance? Well, I believe, Mike, we all have free will, so you can't cancel out free will. I believe that everybody has I believe that God is real. He allows free will. So in reality simply is with that free will, man chooses to do certain things on this planet. He can do things that actually benefit mankind, or he can do things that are detrimental to mankind. Um, the sad part of this simply is that most people don't have moral integrity anymore. They don't seem to understand. They think everything's wishy-washy, so they don't have what I call a distinction between right and wrong anymore. Now, again, we're still, as I see it, is that we are divine beings. And what I mean by divine beings simply is that we come from God. Now, you may disagree with that, but that's what I see. Okay, and my perspective is I've done some videos actually with a gentleman named Phil Langdon, and we talk about this issue. That's we are here in many ways to make heaven within ourselves, not to make heaven on earth. Okay, there's a difference here, and it's a individual individual decision to do that if you want to do that, but you still have free will to do that. In other words, you're not being forced. No one's pointing a gun to you or forcing you to do something, which is actually what it should be. That makes sense philosophically. That makes sense morally. But it's also simple. We have laws that basically those who do harm to other people, as has been in the past, has been subjected to what we call some type of punishment. But that seems to be lingering or no longer in existence, so to speak. It seems to be, again, a wishy-washy type of attitude perspective. But again, you can go from one extreme to the other. You see, you can be very belligerent. You can be, you can do all kinds of harm, to someone maybe that's innocent. I was just watching his video on Gnostic Paul versus Peter and saw that he was live talking about light, electromagnetic energy, looking at this lately. Now we have the 5G towers. Yes, that's what I'm speculating at. But it will be 6G and 7G. That's already being staged already, folks. Okay, they're moving in that direction. You're already hearing 6G and 7G for the future. So people are not doing well. So I've actually looked in something else in the last month, and you don't have to look into it, but I would suggest you do. There's a couple of people I'd recommend that you read something by Raymond Reif, Royal Raymond Reif, who was also involved in some of this stuff long ago. He's a genius. He was a genius, folks. He was able to cure cancer years ago, okay, by using frequency. He understood how to use frequency to kill germs within you or pathogens, whatever, but did not destroy the good stuff, okay? He had the most advanced microscopes that he could actually see living entities as he used this frequency on them. So he knew that he was not killing other good things within the body, but only that what was actually causing harm. See, when we talk about pathogens, you say, well, what is that all about? Well, it's about something as a parasite. It's something that takes energy from your body, that just takes life out of your body. Do you follow what I'm saying, John or Mike here? It means simply is that I'm speculating this, I'm looking at something what they call scalar energy. But this is a scalar product that's made by this company called Spooky 2, SPOOKY, and the number 2. You can look into it. I'm not trying to sell you anything, but I do know simply is I've had that equipment in my bedroom. And I'll tell you this, for the last 2 weeks, I've had it for only 2 weeks. It's not a cheap piece of equipment, but I sleep better than I have ever have since I was maybe a teenager or a young adult. And I know that almost everybody today is struggling with sleep. And if you don't have sleep in your environment, seriously, your life goes downhill real quick. You're not able to concentrate. You're not able to listen. You're lethargic, you see, and you don't have energy whatsoever. So what I'm saying simply is that this all to do with the scalar energy, which was is all to do with Tesla. This is all Tesla's technology. These are the two brainchilds. So Rife was the one who dealt with what we call the killing modality, and Raymond Rife is about killing, what we call the killing modality. So meaning that simply is to kill what was inside you. Okay, like we say, for example, leeches. If you go into rivers in certain places of the world, there'll be leeches on your legs when you walk into a river because they're already sucking the lifeblood out of you. That's what not germs, but that's what pathogens do inside of you. Okay, they rob you of your energy. So if I can give my body this scalar energy that's in a certain frequency that actually is beneficial, then my cells can rejuvenate and be able to fight back what is going on outside of me or inside me. Does that make any sense? And it might be over your heads. But I'm just talking about this in ways simply is people are not able to sleep anymore. People are struggling with sleep. And if you don't get your sleep, you become very irritable. You're not a very happy person. Now, I'm 64 years old. You guys are probably younger than I am. So, yeah, we're all Aries. Yes, that's true. We're all Aries. So I'm not plugging anything here. But I am saying simply is that I've used this particular equipment and I'm getting rest. I would wake up 2 to 3 times at night, and I wake up still, the quote unquote, as you get older, you have this bladder issue, so you quote unquote have to use the restroom. But I fall back to sleep almost within 5 minutes, if even less. Just fall right back to sleep. So it's like a spear between these two. It's simply this. It's similar to a radio, but it's doing different frequencies. It's to do what you have a receiver and you have a transmitter. One is a transmitting to the receiver, and it creates a bubble or aura of protection. I don't know if it's a good word, protection, but it allows your body to go into a state of rest. So it's just something. Yeah, the Schumann resonance is off the charts most of the time. You're right. Yeah, because we're messing with it. This is why all this is all changed. Yeah, and so I've been able to rest with this equipment. And this is the most advanced thing I've seen out there. I would suggest you go to listen to a guy named go to BitChute and listen to a guy called his site's called The Cure for Chronic Disease. And everybody's got chronic disease. Disease simply means not at ease with oneself. No longer he's no longer happy. He's discontent. He's he's tired most of the time. He's actually works harder than he never had. He works hard, and yet he can't find any rest. Okay, and his site is simply called The Cure for Chronic Disease, and he talks about this products. And he's a doctor in Panama, and the guy's lived in 4 different areas of the world. Again, I'm not pushing products here, but I think he's talking about some very serious stuff and why we struggle in our health today. So, anyway, yeah, Mike, thank you for the comment. Thank you. Yeah. As you get older, you just simply don't sleep well, and but the younger people don't sleep well neither because they've got phones in their, they got their these 5G phones in their bedrooms. They got their computer that's not hooked up to Ethernet, which is to do with the Earth, but it's all, you know, it's not connected. You see, it's all 5G in the house. How do you think how are you going to rest there? You see, and so you connect your internet based upon by an Ethernet cable, and I think the people miss the point. They're caught up in this technology. They think it's rave, rave, rave. Well, it's nice, but the point simply, what is it doing to people's sleep? What is it doing to people's how they live? You know, I'm not poo-pooing technology, but if it's not good for mankind, it's a problem. So anyway, this was, like I said, just the Invincible Rainbow, Chapter 9. You can read this book if you want to, Mike, or who else is talking here? I see Mike, John. You can both look at this. Books are actually on archive.org. You can read this book. It's on there. That's where I'm reading it from. So anyway, I appreciate your comments, John. Appreciate your comments, Mike. And let's see if anybody else commented here. I think just the 2 guys you guys communicated here. So appreciate the communication here. I've actually done another recording before this. So if you want to look into that, also be important to look at. So thank you. Have a good day. Thank you both for your comments. We'll talk soon. Take care.